And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Tyler Carlson.
Good morning.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. Did you get caught up on your rest a little bit?
I don't know what that is yet. Maybe that's tonight.
Wow. What a weekend you've had.
It was a tough weekend for everybody. Pretty much everybody who's in this particular area. So it was a really tough weekend. Mother Nature dealt us some pretty severe blows, and then we had a major power supplier, a transmission provider, which is the hub, the bulk electric system.
Right.
Somebody had a problem and it's the power supply that gets into us.
Right.
And if we don't have power supply, we can't do anything for you.
Right.
There's nothing we can do for our members if we don't have power supply.
So part of it was that.
Most of it, a great deal of it was that.
Well,
in addition to some of those
oh my
lines
God.
there.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry, I had just pulled in and probably looked pretty ragtag at that particular point, but I was out and about surveying damage, and that's part of the damage here. That particular pole was laying over a part of the road that we had to cut off to get up to this peak, up to this high spot to service some of the lines that were up top there.
Holy criminy.
Yeah, Mother Nature, she tore it up pretty well.
Whereabouts is this, Tyler?
What about what?
Whereabouts is this? What location?
That's right along the Bullhead Parkway. That's that area you were just seeing was the new. That's the new road that connects the Parkway. Yeah, and it had just, we have a line that's down right there. You can kind of see it. So
Yeah.
And there's a pole up there, but it just tore up. Look at that furrowing that went on, and wow, it was just incredible. It tore up the asphalt and took asphalt and road down with it. It was quite an event. You can
Oh
see
my
there the
gosh.
asphalt on the new road. So, and the cones we had put up because we had lines on either lines that were down trying to keep people off the road if they actually got on the road, because we had a line that was down there. So it was basically around the Parkway, and it was right along the Parkway, just east of the Parkway, where the one of those large 230 kV lines, those really big lines,
Yeah.
one of the phases came loose, and we had quite a difficulty trying to get the powers to recognize that was an outage, and then finally the folks that were going to repair it came down from Benson, Arizona, so it was a 7-hour drive. So we were delayed. Most of our restoration was delayed. We were ready at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Kind of hate to say that we were ready, but we were ready, and we were already switching and sectionalizing to bring as much of the load on as we could. There was 29,000 people out because when the power supplier goes and the bulk transmission goes,
Right.
You've got very little. So
And that took you clear over into Wickiup, didn't it? I mean, that's in that part of your
well, that's
domain?
part of our service territory. That really didn't get hammered.
didn't? Okay,
This is
good.
just here. The week before, that area that you're talking about got hammered, and now the week after, this area got hammered. So our folks have been pretty busy the last couple of weeks. But it was those microbursts. You can see what it does there. It's just like an axe. It just cuts it right off at a higher spot. That's very unusual, but that's pretty typical of a microburst. Is it cuts the pole off like an axe about a certain height off the ground, and so anyway, that itself is down at the park. There was an incredible amount of damage. Mother Nature was pretty brutal. A lot of trees down. Yeah, Mother Nature really dealt a blow here. So we had 29,000 folks out. We basically had waited for we had to wait for the bulk power supply to come back on, but we weren't just doing nothing. We were actually fixing everything else that was busted or broken, and switching. What we typically do is we have alternate sources on the distribution system to
Right.
feed different ways. So we were trying to isolate the bad areas, the areas that had gone down. And by the time the folks got there, the folks from Benson got there early in the morning. We had gone from 29,000 to 15,000. And then by about 10 o'clock in the morning, we had 10 to noon, we had gotten it down to about less than 1,000. and then by early afternoon it was 500 and some, and then we then the hardest work begins, or it's most difficult because now you're doing ones and twos. You're
Right,
going off, and there's a
right.
pull down, or there was there was some footage in there that there was an awning that was ripped off the back of one person's house and then laid on the front, and it actually went right through the electrical service. So it's a single outage, but there's a lot of work to get that person back in, because you have to redo their whole service. So it was a mess, and folks really worked hard, and I if you think about it, those folks were out from 7:40 at night, the folks working, and they worked, and they were still there when I was there at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. They were just going home, but they had we certainly hoped that we had gotten all the outages taken care of. We say that we hope, and you'd wonder why we don't know, but we don't have the ability to call 41,000 meters and make sure that they're all up and running, and we can't while we're fixing. We don't have the ability to go out and knock on 41,000 doors and see that everyone's there. So if somebody left for the weekend and they were out, and they're unaware of it, and we're then unaware of it, we may still find one or two outages that we're just not aware of. But everything we were aware of, we were fixing up, and they were all done in the afternoon. And it's not just kudos to the guys out there working, because they're out, and they're out in that same lightning, hail. They're out there working in this. But yet, so
that's what I want to do, is work with electrical connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And a thunderstorm and rain and hail,
yeah.
But these are our superheroes, and they're out there working all the time. And but we also had folks from the office. There was folks manning the call center. We had folks that were bringing out food and water to folks. We also were helping the emergency services, and we appreciate them being in place. But we were helping them obtain water and ice. So I mean, when the meantime we're doing something, it's not just the guys out there that are working on the lines that you see. There's a whole bunch of people. That office was there was a lot of folks there yesterday.
So tell me something that kind of missed here, is that so the power is out, you're not getting your source power out of Benson or wherever it comes up out of there. How do you go back and check you're up here trying to repair things, but how do you do it without power to tell you've got power to this or power to that?
Well, we're not landlocked such that it's only one line that goes down. That we have alternate feeds into the system.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're doing the best we can to switch loads off of other parts of the system, and so that's what a great deal of the effort was. We had to switch loads off of some substations that had no power to them.
And that's not just going over and throwing a switch.
No, that's not turning the key and pushing the button. No, it's not.
All right.
There's a lot of physical activity that goes along with switching, doing all that switching. So that's why we were able to get the 29,000 down to 15,000, is that we were able to switch and bring a whole bunch of other folks on. But that particular line, part of our problem was getting the attention of one of the power suppliers, one of the transmission providers. We couldn't get them engaged to go do switching at the dam and that type of stuff. And I, it's always a difficulty for us, because for us it's 29,000 outages. For them it's one. It's us.
Yeah.
And so they're not always as motivated as we are. So we're a little bit antsy, waiting for them to get their stuff together. But part of the delay is
I know
waiting
you,
for that.
and I know what I know what you'd be saying if this camera wasn't on right now. I do know that.
Maybe you might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah, and today
Lord.
with not as much sleep as I normally get, I might be even closer to that. But anyway, we did get everything put back together, and as you saw in some of that film, there was a lot of damage.
Oh my gosh.
There was a lot of damage. And
this wasn't the first time this has happened out here, though, is it? I mean, or has it happened to this degree prior to this?
I don't recall it happening to this degree and for this long. I think that the problem that was the biggest problem for us is the transmission system outage that we have no control over, and we don't
Yeah.
get to fix it, and we don't have the hot seat button to push to make people be very excited and get on with it. So that was different than all the other outages.
Okay.
We have wind shear problems out here, and the wind shear wind speeds are as big as they are in tornadoes.
Right.
And but they're different. They are in the wind shears are incredibly odd. And if you saw all of those poles, because I was out there looking at them, all those were good, solid new poles. If anyone thinks, oh, well, you ought to replace your poles with newer poles, they were all really good poles. They were just chopped off with the wind. It is just phenomenal what the wind shears can do. Now we have programs in place that we have different areas that we are bolstering. Since about 2010, we've been going out and bolstering some areas with steel poles or concrete poles, and at least putting them in every few poles, so if the wind shear does come, it'll maybe knock a pole or two down, but we don't have a domino effect.
All right.
Exactly. 2009, we had one. We had 1.5 miles of line that went down, and it was all the way along 95, all the way down towards Fort Mojave. And I remember being there, and there was lines down everywhere. Because as soon as they start going, they tend to, once one or two go,
Right.
they're putting a lot of strain on the
Sure.
rest of the poles, and if the wind keeps blowing, they're leaning over, and the wire is pulling on those particular poles, and pretty soon they just start snapping. So
Wow.
we've gone through quite a bit in the last 8 years, and it looks like that this area here, we had just not got to this area yet. We have done others along the parkway. We've done a lot more down in the Fort Mojave area, because that's where we tend to get the biggest amount of wind shears. For some reason it comes down off of the hills,
Right.
and it's that flat area, and it really whacks it. But we've had a couple of these that were amazing.
I got to break just for a second, get a commercial
You
break
go.
in here. So I'm sitting here on the morning show set, talking about this weekend's stuff. And as you said, there has been other days or other times in our history where we've had this. People do need to understand, I think, and so many people were totally unprepared. I mean, Lynn and I, we can do 24 hours probably, as long as it's in 150 outside. But a lot of people, I guess, just moving into the area don't understand that we, at best, are a target for this stuff to happen. I mean, it's not the power company, it's not anything other than it happens. Mother Nature is going to, whether it be a flood, whether it be wind, but I mean,
Yeah, it does happen, and it's been happening. It's been happening here for some time. If you look at lightning strikes, if you look at the amount of lightning weather we get and wind weather we get, as far as all the cooperatives in the United States, we're in the top 10 to 20% of bad weather. People don't really
Really?
understand that, because people think of things like tornadoes, or they think of things like hurricanes, and they think, well, that's really all there is. Well, if you look at the amount of lightning we get, and you look at the wind shears we get, and there's a tree right there. I mean, look at the size of that tree that went down in the park.
good grief.
That's incredible. So I mean, the wind that we get here, when we do get this wind, is pretty phenomenal. That's not a very small tree, and then of course that's one of the little shade areas in the park. I mean, we get a lot of wind. This is not unusual. We've had wind before. Like I said, we've had 1.5 miles of line down, and it's impossible for us to know when and where that wind is going to come in. We kind of thought this area might have been a little bit protected, because there's a lot of contour there. So
Yeah.
Normally the wind shears take a flatter surface to really get themselves going. But this came right up over all of the bluffs, and we thought we were protected. But where it came off, you can basically see where it came off a little rise, and the wind came straight across. That's exactly where it broke the pole off.
No way.
Just right across there. So that wind comes down, it comes right across. Yeah, we do get a lot of weather. Thankfully, we don't get a lot of outages like we did with the transmission system. And we'll be looking at our after, the after incident issues to see if we can make that be a little more efficient for us on the communication and the ability to restore, because we think that there are some things that the transmission folks on the bulk power system could have done a little bit differently, that we could have assisted them to make this a little bit shorter. But that was the bulk of our problem, was trying to get the transmission system back up and running.
Aside from that, I mean, obviously that's something you can't do anything about. I guess the point I was leading to is that people need to take some responsibility for their own well-being. I mean, we cannot, for an instant, okay, we're going to get this storm, it's going to be on the 23rd, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we see the weather charts and everything else. I always, every day practically, I'm on the weather radar map.
Sure.
Seeing if we've got stuff coming in. It's not difficult. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you get on it, you look, and if stuff's moving past Kingman, you know you're going to get hit. But there needs to be some responsibility taken by the people who live in the area, understanding that this is part of our climate, this is part of our daily possibility. So they need to have some water, they need to have some batteries, they need to have some candles.
Sure. This is hard for me to really understand. I grew up in a really small community in the Midwest in which tornadoes were a regular occurrence, a regular thing. And we didn't think twice about what we had to do. The preparation for, when you heard the whistle, when you heard the siren go off, you knew what that meant. You had to get down in the basement. The basement had water and such in it. And when the high winds from a tornado did cause damage, we knew what that was like. I mean, folks in the more rural communities, and we are rural. We are not a urban metropolitan area. We are in the rural area, and folks in the rural area, I can remember going on storm jobs when I was a much younger man, and in the wintertime in ice storm jobs. And I remember people being out for 4 or 5 days, and we'd finally get to their house, their location, and the couple there would come out because they had made biscuits on their stove, not the electric stove, on their wood stove, and they came out and they said, "Hey, thanks for being here. It's great that you're here. We're happy, and here's some biscuits here." And we'd say, "We're really sorry you've been out for 5 days." "Well, we knew that you'd get to us, so." And so, that type of thought process. I mean, that's the way I grew up. I didn't grow up with an expectation that everything was going to be there, and if when I hit my light switch, that it was going to be there for sure. We always had alternative thought processes going on, which is what you're talking about. What's the alternative? Either have provisions, be ready with batteries on your for your flashlights, or have even if something that if you really have something that you need electricity all the time, well, they have standby generators, or you can find out which places are not out of power and go to them. There's folks that do that quite often. In fact, when we have outages, normally somebody will say, they'll call in and say, "Can you call me when this is done and it's restored?" And we do. The system will call them, and typically they go across the river, they go somewhere else until we call them, and then they come on back. So I mean, people have alternatives, and that's something that you always do. But this doesn't just happen in the rural areas. It wasn't a few weeks ago that SRP had 8,000 to 10,000 people out for a very long extended time. So it happens everywhere, and that was also weather related. It does happen. Mother Nature decides what she wants to do, and it wasn't the city of Bullet City that decided that storm. Hey, we've got to take a look at our 5-day weather forecast, ladies and gentlemen. Brought to you by Mojave Skin and Cancer. They're proud to be leading, continuously operating provider of specialized dermatology services in Mojave County and Clark County since 1987.
All right, today we will have a high of 110 in Laughlin, 81 in Flagstaff, 103 in Phoenix, 85 in Los Angeles, 114 in Needles, and 106 in Las Vegas. And this is what our week will look like. 111 tomorrow with a low of 88, 107 on Wednesday. Winds come from the south at 12 miles an hour. Thursday, temperature dies down a little bit to 105 degrees with a low of 89, and Friday picks back up to 109 with a low of 88.
Thank you, Michaela. Weekend brought to you by Mojave Skin and Cancer. Give them a call today, get checked out. Tell you what, it pays. It pays to catch that stuff early. Now I want to, Tara, do you have any questions?
Well, yeah,
Anything
if you
wanna say?
don't mind, if we could switch gears for a second. Last week you had that emergency. You asked your members to utilize some conservation efforts because of the impact on the power supply from the California fires. And you subsequently put out a press release saying that you thanked them for doing all of that. So maybe as a point of clarification, I noticed on social media, of course, that people were saying it's because of the folks who did not conserve between 2 and 10 p.m. that we experienced the power outage. So,
No, there's absolutely no connection.
God.
well,
No,
so
it's
I just-
interesting, but
right.
that was, the power outage was actually a physical problem on the transmission system, and actually was a broken conductor that on the transmission system that stopped power from coming in. And there was no connection to people who did or didn't. We do really appreciate the folks that did walk up to conserve, and it was that issue is really that was a California-driven problem. And remember, the California folks are trying to bring the California model into Arizona with an amendment. So remember that come voting time. They're trying to bring that model that caused us a great deal of problems over here. But no, there is no connection, and I would like to make sure that I point out that I really thank all the folks at Mojave Electric, and that's everyone, not just the crews, although those are the superheroes. We had folks working really hard, and I'm looking right at you, and thank you very much for being there, and thank you much for your efforts, because they worked the full week, and then they worked all weekend, and without a whine or a whimper or any of that kind of stuff. These folks just get up and they get in there, and it's pretty amazing.
Sounds like a great crew.
It is a great crew.
That's fabulous.
It's a great group of folks.
Well, it's obviously everybody's got their power back on, most of them right now, right?
Well, we think everyone does, but like I said, if you left for the weekend and you happen to have an outage, we're not aware of it. But once you are aware of an outage, give us a call right back. Typically, storms like this, you can have residual damage later. It weakens something, and it's fairly weak, and it's at the end of its life, and we're not aware of it yet. And all it takes is another little storm or breeze. So really, within a couple of weeks, you could have isolated outages that are caused by, essentially caused by this storm disturbance. But
So, be on notice, Bullhead City Council, the mayor, and the city. No more of this stuff, I'm telling you right now. It just can't happen. I want to thank you very much for being here, Tyler. I know
thank
you're
you.
whipped. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. It's good to see you as well.
you bet.
Thank you, Tara.
You're welcome.
Did a great job this weekend, as did Michaela. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Chad, thank you.
Anytime.
And Chris, certainly thank you as well. I've got a great crew too. Until Monday. This is Monday. What the hell am I talking about? Until Tuesday. That's the next day, right? Okay, until then. Can somebody leave me a note to that effect? I know. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.